Well, as countries like Kenya, Liberia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo prepare to hold elections, analysts in Washington are trying to identify key challenges to democratic elections in Africa and ways of improving the electoral process. Reporter Mariama Diallo has that story.
Recent peaceful democratic transitions of power in Nigeria, Ghana and Benin are considered examples for other African nations. Kenya will hold its general election in August and Liberia in October, but it's less likely the Democratic Republic of Congo will hold its planned elections this year. This week, the DRC's opposition group, Le Rassemblement, accused the country's Electoral Commission president of declaring war on the Congolese people by announcing that elections promised to be held by the end of this year probably will not take place. DRC's President Joseph Kabila was allowed to stay in power until late 2017 under a transition deal as long as elections were held by the end of this year. The U.S. insists that the agreement be fulfilled.
We are ready to take additional action to sanction those who stand in the way of the DRC's first democratic transition of power.
Last month in Pretoria, Kabila insisted his goal is to hold elections.
Let's organize elections together as a nation, together as political parties, civil society. And we still have that objective in mind.
But more than just holding elections, Kabila has to go, according to a DRC social activist.
But the main problem actually for the DRC case is not having election this year. It's getting the president to clearly say he's not gonna stay run again for the next term, because the agreement says they agreed he's not going to be a candidate, but he never said it clearly.
Elections should be viewed as part of the peace-building process, not as a goal in themselves, says democracy advocate Elizabeth Lewis. She says Africa has models to emulate.
I think Kenya is an example where kind of this look at broad-based constitutional and legal reform was a positive step.
As some countries face deadlocks and others' processes move along, a word of wisdom from a leading scholar.
We understand that elections do not by themselves a democracy make. However, they play a critical role. And free and fair elections play an essential role in sustaining democratic processes.
Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
After years of clashes between herdsmen and indigents of southern Kaduna, the warring sides appear willing to seek a peaceful resolution to the crisis. Representatives of both groups who attended a reconciliatory meeting in Kafanchan, Kaduna State, have agreed to bury the hatchet. Channels Television's correspondent Chimeze Nyocha compiled this report.
Third-party mediation is a proven solution to conflict. That's the role Global Peace Foundation Nigeria is hoping to play in the southern Kaduna crisis, where communal clashes between alleged Fulani herdsmen and natives of southern Kaduna have resulted in the loss of lives and property and the displacement of families in many communities, particularly Jama'a, Kaura, Kauru and Sanga local government areas. Elders from the affected communities meeting in Kafanchan want an end to the violence.
You will notice that in southern Kaduna, a lot of houses have been burned and several things have happened, but yet there is no single IDP camp in southern Kaduna. And it's necessary to have an IDP camp so that there will be reconstruction, there will be development, and there will be true reconciliation and, some form of reparation, some form of compensation.
Although relative peace has returned to the area due to the intervention of security agencies, the convener of this meeting hopes for a peaceful resolution to the conflict.
There's a common understanding, in fact, in the process of our reaching out, one point we kept hearing over and over was that from all the various parties, whether Fulanis or the natives, whoever, is that they are tired of the conflicts and they want a way forward. They want to resolve these issues. And so this, for us, is very important. The people you see here today representing the various organizations or representing the various communities were not just selected and handpicked. In each of these communities, we visited them, met with hundreds of them, and there, on their own, nominated these persons to represent them.
After much deliberations, leaders of the two groups agreed to reconcile their differences and move forward. But they want the federal government to review the ECOWAS protocol on free movement of persons and goods by checkmating the influx of marauding herdsmen into Nigeria. They also call for the establishment of a development commission to ensure the rehabilitation of destroyed communities.
There is a need also to have a Southern Kaduna Development Commission. The ravaged areas of the Northeast have had approved right by the federal government Northeast Development Commission. And I think this is very necessary.
From what everybody was expressing, people want to move forward. Now what we've just done today is to say, okay, the road is here, let's drive on that road. A road to peace, a path to stability, a path to sustainable development. So when people begin to talk like this, you can see, because they've been talking differently before now, today the conversation changed.
At the end of the meeting, participants are optimistic that resolutions arrived at will ultimately translate to a solution that lasts.
Well, you're watching Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. The illegal ivory trade has decimated elephant stocks across Africa. Delegates gathered in Geneva for a meeting of the Convention on International Trade and Endangered Species, known as CITES. As Henry Ridgwell reports, activists want to come together, rather tougher enforcements to tackle the criminal gangs behind the ivory trade.
Shuidong in southern China, a hub, investigators say, for the smuggling of ivory poached from African elephants. Secretly filmed footage shows a network of safe houses where the goods are on display. An estimated 80% of ivory destined for China passes through Shuidong.
This town has emerged as probably the biggest hub in the world for illegal trade in ivory tusks. We first came across the footprints of this group in Tanzania in 2014. The country has lost half its elephants in 5 years, the biggest loss in Africa.
As Tanzania began to clamp down on smuggling, the gangs moved to Mozambique. Investigators secretly recorded one of the traffickers describing the trade through the Mozambican port of Pemba.
We're able to move anything through Pemba. Everyone there has been bought up. The customs clearance agent. The customs also gets a share of the money.
Investigators say the evidence shows smugglers operate with impunity.
There was a few cases where they had some tusks seized, but they were never arrested. And they sort of saw these seizures as really a business expense rather than a worry that they might get arrested.
Hong Kong authorities confiscated ivory worth $10 million earlier this month. China plans to ban the trade by the end of 2017. But John Seller, former chief enforcement officer at CITES, told VOA via Skype there is too much focus on the trade and not enough on the criminals involved.
There is the speculation involved here, that there is undoubtedly money laundering to my mind. This is a much more complex issue.
Seller says CITES lacks the teeth to enforce its regulations.
Organised criminal networks are now major players in all forms or many forms of wildlife trafficking. And you need to bring an organised law enforcement response to that.
Without that enforcement, activists warn ivory poaching will likely continue until the criminal networks are investigated and dismantled. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
It's time now for a short break, but before we go, a reminder to visit our website, channelstv.com, for all the latest information around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. And still to come, President Paul Kagame is running for re-election in Rwanda, where he has been in power for the last 17 years. Is this election a campaign or a coronation? Do stay with us.